Hello, everybody.
Hello.
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 Oh,
It's us.
there will be no more echo. I had something unmuted. It is now okay. Before anyone says anything.
There should have been four of us, but we killed Schultes.
Yeah, we accidentally sabotaged him. We will see if he's joining us shortly or not.
Most things fix themselves if you just restart them over and over, right?
Hopefully.
Was there context to that statement, Wally, or... Oh. He's volunteering. I see.
Maybe if we tell Shoal that Wooly's trying to replace him, it'll work.
Oh, I just got the notification that Paladin Discord is live.
Same.
Sweet. Yes, you should definitely threaten him.
I just got the notification that I needed to restart Twitch.
Oh.
Perfect.
Can we introduce ourselves? Hi, I'm Rebdol Spoon Red Wowhead. But you can call me Rin. I'll just go down the list. And then there's Hekili, aka Taco Dog, and also Skeletor, redpaladin.xyz. You could tell who's talking because there's a chat or the voice overlay in the top left corner of the stream. Welcome. I'm a professional.
I like how we just outweighted you and then you had to introduce us for us.
Yep.
You could also refer to her as Divine Steed Enthusiast.
Yep. You know, we did Hive Mind yesterday, and I was like, why are we stuck in combat when we were in Karazhan? And I was so mad. And they're like, why does it matter? And I'm just like, I don't think you understand that you're gonna have to keep stopping because I don't have Cavalier and I don't know my way around this instance. And that's my story about how much I love Divine Steed and our mobility. Oh yeah, what was it when you judge something, it makes you fast? Was it long arm or was it
That
the
was
other
long
one?
arm.
Yeah, bring back long arm of the law.
I preferred Pursuit of Justice, personally, but...
Maybe you just don't share a passion for murdering critters like I do.
Well, you murder
Bring
the
back-
critters and you have a perma speed boost until you murder them with a spender.
I was just going to say bring back Gust of Wind, but that's not really applicable today.
I don't even... Oh, Shola says things appear to be working. When in doubt, restart until it's fixed.
That's the spirit. We'll see if we get our
It's true.
fourth person here in a moment. And then we'll actually begin.
Marco?
Paulo?
I'm here now.
You've
Welcome.
ruined the game. Well, we've been waiting patiently. This is Old Man Shoal, aka Barely In.
Oh, I should probably get rid of the Barelian. That was another joke.
I don't get it.
Um, so my buddy and I have a theory that all of the weird paranormal or alien type stuff that people see, they're all just bears.
I don't like it.
Like everything is bears. Chupacabra, bear.
It's a bear.
Sasquatch, bear. Everything, they're all just bears. And we also really like all of the alien stuff. So
I think it's important to note that a chupacabra would be a hairless bear. If you have not seen a hairless bear, Google Images is your friend or your foe, depending how you feel after you look at one.
I saw pretty recently pictures that made it look like the gray aliens that people think might just be owls.
I like
I'm
it.
still gonna go with bears, but I like the idea.
Is there a bear owl?
And there's owl bears.
What?
It's a D&D thing, but
Let's
they
just talk
exist.
about those. Oh, I don't like nerd shit. Alright. Should we start?
Alright, I think we'll actually begin. So, before we get into the festivities here, I think the first thing that we have to mention is that Blizzard loves to change things. And they equally love not discussing when they change things or letting people know. So early on in the beta cycle for Battle for Azeroth, the talent Zeal was increasing the proc rate of Art of War and Blade of Wrath. Now, this was intentional because Zeal is attack speed, and Art of War and Blade of Wrath are both RPPM, which are only potentially affected by haste, not attack speed. But there is some weird interaction where it was actually increasing the proc rate. This was fixed before Battle for Azeroth went live. But it has recently come to our attention that at some point this change was reverted. We're not sure if it's a change, a bug fix, or who knows what actually happened, but now if you use Zeal, it will increase the proc rate of your Art of War and your Blade of Wrath. So Simcraft is now updated for this if you use raid bots on nightly. So you can see if you run Zeal and Bow, it'll be a lot closer in DPS to whatever you're using before, or possibly better in some cases.
I guess we should also say we don't really know if it's intended or how many people it was intended to work that way by. Does that? It seems the devs don't even know how it's intended to work. That's what I'm trying to say. And we definitely don't know how it's supposed to work. So maybe it'll change again in the future and maybe it won't. I guess we'll let you know.
Well, we're seeing something similar actually with recent changes for shadow priests and their apparitions. Because earlier in BFA, they had put in a multiplier there that was applicable if you had certain talents and then not applicable if you didn't. And then when they talked about, I guess, 825, they talked about fixing that when it was like, well, actually, that was something you had said was a deliberate decision. But now you're pulling it back out for balance going into 8.3, I guess. So I think maybe sometimes they forget what some of their hot fixes are about and let them fall back off.
Maybe
Yeah, and
they had
like,
talks before of having a secret bonus for Zeal of 10%, but what we're seeing is much larger than 10%, so.
Shows why it's also very good to check logs against sims and see if you're seeing something happen differently, because yeah, everything has to be sort of like reverse engineered for Simcraft and other tools.
Yep. And things like randomly change a year into the expansion for no reason. Well, actually, it could have happened a while ago and we never would have known because we were under the assumption that it was not supposed to affect the proc rate. So.
Well, we tested it back at the beginning of Dazara Lore or something around there, end of Uldir-ish. I remember. I think that's when we were like, yeah, it's working, or the fix went in, and we saw that it wasn't increasing after that, or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I even went back and looked at all the times we might have talked about it, and I think we were just like, I don't know how this is supposed to work, but this is how it's working this minute, so I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yep. So now with the small updates out of the way, just as another reminder, this is pretty much the 1 year anniversary of the Paladin Discord stream, and pretty much the Ret stream, because we are the consistent ones of the bunch. So not to dump on the holies or the prots, of course, but Ret is the superior spec.
This isn't even no, it's quality content. It's just a few of us sitting in a Discord channel talking about stuff.
Also, gotta remember that we're the only ones that have the channels in the right order.
That's true.
Very true. Alright, so I guess we're going to start off here. So some of our topics today, we obviously have Hekili here. We're going to start off with some information about him. After that, we're going to move on to 8.3. After we rant about 8.3, we're going to rant about Shadowlands. Because we can say discuss, but everything turns into a rant. That's how this works, so. Alright, so Hekili, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. You're definitely a staple in the community, even if you don't pop in too much yourself. I'm sure
Yeah,
plenty of people here have either heard of or use your add-on. If you want to give us some background on that.
Sure. So I have the Hekili add-on because it's easy to remember things if you just name everything after yourself. And that was a project that I started during Mists of Pandaria, as I started as playing Enhancement Shaman. And there've been other options for like priority helper type add-ons, which is what my add-on does, over the years. And for enhancement back then, there was like shock and awe, and there was a CLC module for enhancement and things like that. But as I was getting like more and more involved with enhancement shamans, which is not the subject of this stream obviously, but was starting to learn like a lot about people optimizing their play and then thinking that they were doing everything right, or how a sim would do it, or how their guides are saying to do it, and but finding out that people were really not. So I developed Hekili, for enhancement. There was some enthusiasm amongst shamans, so it expanded to elemental, and then retribution paladins came next, and have always been pretty enthusiastic supporters of the add-on. So it's been a lot of fun having all y'all's support.
Yeah. I always have to wonder if Skeletor's microphone went out.
Nope, I was gonna see if someone else wanted to hop in there.
I don't know. Yeah, for it, our APL's pretty neat, and it goes off of that. That's what tells SimCraft what to do, and that's how it spits out numbers. And since that's pretty good for us, then Hekili's also pretty good for us. So, shut up, Wally. He said our APL is a mess. What do you think about Prot APL, everyone? It's probably trash.
Wally, do I have to go dig through and find all your prot APL commits and bring them up on stream?
Oh goodness, that would be amazing. One day.
As someone who spent a lot of time reading and translating priority lists, retribution is far from the worst priority list.
Thank you.
That's my favorite kind of compliment. Makes me.
You're the
That's all I
least
ever want in
awful.
life, is to be like the least terrible. But yeah, we tell everybody to use the app. I use it.
I
We
also
tell
use
people
it.
to use it.
I think I first tried it in WAD.
It's actually come a long way since back then. because when it started with just a few specs supported, that was also um, sort of a time where it was all kind of manually built out inside the add-on. So I would have to look at each spec's priorities and try to keep up with each spec's priorities completely manually and just hard code them into the add-on. And then as of late Legion or early BFA, I developed the ability to translate SimCraft priorities pretty much directly. Sometimes they require a little bit of tweaking or refining, but that's what sort of led to making the add-on work for pretty much all DPS. There's a little bit of variability between some different specs that have really challenging mechanics to model, but yeah, so now like as any APL gets updated, I have a tool that lets me know that there's an actual change that was developed for me, and then I can import that and make any refinements that I need to make, and then have those updates online very quickly. So it's much faster to make it so the add-on is showing you the latest priority, and thankfully, especially amongst rep paladins, when there are changes coming, some Skeletors reach out to me or other people reach out to me and just give me a heads up. So um, it's like almost immediately updated when that's going to happen.
Also seems like your Discord is like pretty active too, and I know you do like a pretty good job at replying to people and weeding out what's like user error and actually not working as intended. So is community like helpful, or well, maybe I shouldn't ask you to like trash your community. I'm sure they're very helpful.
I mean, it's mixed. I mean, part of it is there are definitely features of the add on that are not clearly communicated how to use them. So a lot of times people will, load the add on for the first time and they're like, hey, cool, there are 4 icons on my screen. What's this about? And it's like, why isn't it telling me to pop Avenging Wrath or whatever? And it's like, okay, so, someday a responsible developer would be like, let's give a good like introduction to Hekili manual or something like that. Um, tell you about like turning your cooldown abilities on and off, or telling it that you want interrupts to show up or whatever. And like also help guide you through some of the customization, because maybe you don't want 4 icons, maybe you just want to see one, or you want to see one for single target and one for multi-target, like whatever those situations are. There's a lot of like customization and configuration you could do, but I have not necessarily made it super easy to figure that stuff out. So sometimes I do have to help people work through the chaos that is how I've organized the options. And then sometimes people find bugs. There was a recent bug with translating one of the mage priorities, and people reported that to me and gave me some of the debugging information that the add-on can make available, and we sorted that out in like a couple hours. So um, I appreciate all the feedback that I get. Sometimes it's a me problem, sometimes it's a you problem, but either way, I like to sort it out.
Yeah, speaking of more complicated specs to implement, I know like the two that I remember seeing in your Discord that were giving you some of the most problems were like Arcane and Fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of it is um, the difference between how Simulation Craft runs their sims and runs their iterations. Like they get to move forward in time and look at slices of time. So, can I do something now? No. Well, then what about, a tenth of a second from now? No. What about a tenth of a second from then? And so the add on has to say, okay, what's going on now? Is the GCD up? Oh, that's going to be in half a second. Okay, what will have changed between now and half a second from now? So all of those changes, whether a buff is ticking down, or you're going to have a resource that procs for you or something like that, I have to try to forecast that. And so I have to develop models for each specialization that knows what is going to happen. And so for fire, you've got the complication that you can fire blast while you're casting another spell, which was not something I had, built the add-on to accommodate initially. And for arcane, you had these distinct phases where you're dumping all your resources. You had your burn phase, and then you had your conservation phase where you're building up your mana again. And that was also something that was not really built into the add-on originally. And the way that those things were modeled in Simulation Craft um, didn't translate directly to how the add-on would work, because it would have, like, Simulation Craft knows if you're in a certain kind of fight and when the next boss mechanic is going to happen, or when, something about your whatever your sim preferences were, like, those are fixed in terms of what Simulation Craft is going to see. Where the add-on has to be like, okay, like, I just have to make the best assumptions I can about what's going on right now. I can know that you're in a boss fight, but I don't keep track of whether there's going to be ad waves or something else happening soon. And so I have to predict what's predictable and then just react to anything else that comes up, um, you know, and just try to catch everything that I can. And again, Arcane and Fire were just ones that had a little bit more complicated mechanics that took me longer to sort out. There's still, I wouldn't say they're perfect, but I don't know of anything that's got them modeled better at the moment.
Do you find that there are places where Simcraft does things that you're like, well, humans don't really react that way, or like there's some minutia that you kind of fudge for your rotation stuff, or is it all pretty much just straight as Simsy kind of?
I find that in the Simulation Craft priorities, like, when I look at them, like, I've considered doing a project where I can translate criteria in Simulation Craft into English, because if you look at a Simulation Craft priority and then you look at a guide for your specialization side by side, the Simulation Craft priority is more complicated, and you can have, like, oh, when do I use Crusader Strike? Well, here are 5 different situations where you would use it in different places in the priority, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like, multiple different criteria that you consider, that when you're actually playing as a player, you don't consider all of them. I look at I'm not going to call anybody out. You look at some priority lists, and there will be one entry for an ability that will have like 15 different conditions baked into one line of the priority. And it's like, a player who wants to get the DPS that Simulation Craft says they're going to get is not going to be able to interpret that and make that consideration on the fly, unless you simplify it into something that's more sane. My add-on doesn't make it more sane. It's just like, sure, I'm a computer, I can go ahead and look into all of those 15 conditions. But I think sometimes it's a little bit of a disservice, because you can end up expecting your simulation to do things that you probably wouldn't be able to pull off without an add-on to help you, really, in game.
That's why I got it this expansion, because I was just like writing my guide for VFA, like a year ago, and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way I can make this many calculations every single GCD. Like, I'm gonna get something that's gonna do it for me." And I mean, it helps.
I mean, we get those kind of questions in the questions chat every once in a while that have these like overly specific conditions, and like, well, if Blade just went on CD and Judge is available and the moon is full and it's the third Friday of the
Mercury
month,
is in
like what
retrograde.
exactly? Like, what do I hit? And it's nice having something that just kind of simplifies it.
And when those people are just being obtuse, we just say, just get Hekili. I mean, we do anyway, but it's just like, if you want to be that 100% sure for every single global cooldown, get a calculator to tell you what to do. And that's basically what the add-on does. Like,
Conditions, I mean, sometimes, to be totally honest, like, some priority lists, like, optimize, like, I feel like in a Simulation Craft priority list, if you're trying to be like, okay, Simulation Craft says I'm going to get 50k DPS in this kind of fight, and then you go try to do that in game, but like half of the conditions there, you just can't translate through your own brain on the fly. Like, sometimes those conditions are like a 0.1% DPS optimization, and like that's why you don't end up seeing those same conditions written into the guide for the spec, because it's like, oh yeah, there is this really really niche edge case where um your cooldowns are lined up in a certain way, so you would pick this thing over the other thing. But wasting your brain power on it may not ever actually pay off in terms of real world DPS. And so I think sometimes, I know simulation craft is a tool to be optimal, um, but like there's like the 0.1% or the 0.05% optimizations that I think may be just confusing to people, and that trying to execute those without a tool to help you probably results in losing DPS because you confuse yourself mid fight.
Yeah, one thing I want to add to that is one thing you'll see in the red APL that certain people had concerns with before, like why are these certain conditions like that? And with the red APL, it's not all about the maximum DPS. Some of our concerns are the actual rotation itself, like how it feels. Like if we didn't have them optimized in a certain way, the rotation that would be recommended to you, it would actually increase the amount of downtime you had for no benefit. So we're not really doing it for a DPS gain in some cases. We're doing it so you can save 5 to 10 seconds of downtime in a given fight, rather than
Yeah,
sitting waiting for things.
it's a balance of like absolute best output and like something that doesn't feel like trash to play.
Right. Well, and people don't realize, but like when you do play, like that downtime, depending on where, if you did have that additional downtime, where it lines up in a fight with whatever the fight mechanics are, like that downtime in the real world could potentially cost you far more DPS than what you would get out of something that's, you know,
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable.
Yeah, I know one thing. Like, have you seen? I know I definitely have an increase in complexity in APLs, like from the Essence system and cooldowns and stacking.
For the Essence system, actually, it's funny because the development across simulation craft for essences was very slow and iterative over time. Like people figuring out how they were going to tell simulation craft that you needed to line up your ink pod and razor coral at 30% and things like that. I know that's trinkets, not essences, but like a lot of those optimizations are all designed to sync up because, okay, so you're going to do that, and you also want your Guardian of Azeroth to be popped at the right time, and all of that kind of came in slow. And so because I try to make the add-on take its cues from um, simulation craft, like I was a little bit slower in that, and I had to kind of come up with some generic conditions so that people didn't just have their essence slotted and never get a recommendation for it. Um, so there is a little bit of complexity there. I ended up seeing a lot of the APLs end up making a separate action list for the essences themselves, and then just kind of reference it in the middle of their cooldowns or whatever. And that tended to work for most people. But then other folks had like, people that are actually using font of power and complicated trinkets that they're also trying to sync up with their essences. Like that did add complexity for the specs that are more concerned about that.
Yeah, I know for us, we're at suspect that we have not hyper optimized the APL like that for certain situations, and things like that we generally just cover in the guide instead.
Yeah, I mean, the part where it gets complicated with that is that um like right now everybody's going to raid bots to use simulation craft anyway, right? So raid bots is an awesome tool, and people are making their gear choices based on it. And so, I know that I want the raid bot's result about DPS and what my best piece of gear is, to be as accurate as possible. And sometimes your essence choices will really actually weigh heavily into that. If you're going with Guardian of Azeroth, like you're more likely to pick talents that are going to help you cram DPS into that window of time, especially if it lines up at 3 minutes or whatever. So those can be like optimized to like the 90% or 95% level, and that's great. But I think some of the optimizations that could make them even better and squeeze out a few hundred more DPS potentially, um, are get back into that territory where you're being overly complicated and people would never really be able to execute it, and they may not even know to ever even actually look at what their sim character did when they got that DPS result anyway.
I think part of that too is like fight mechanics, and some fights you got to hold CDs for something, so it'll change. When you want to pop essences and stuff like.
Yeah, and that might be something actually but in future simulation craft development. We have different fight types. We have the classic patchwork. We have hectic ad cleave. There's um, I forget what they're calling it, but the dungeon mode that's
Dungeon slice.
trying to kind of emulate Mythic Plus and all of that. But maybe there should be some sim conditions where you could say that you're looking at specific cooldown windows that priority lists could kind of take a cue from, because otherwise you'll see that like folks like Method and some of the really top end raiders end up writing um, custom fights and making tweaks to the priority to kind of be ready for that custom fight that they're simming for. So you'd see that with like elemental shaman priorities for some of the fights in Dazar lore.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where even though there's a lot of information and a lot of tools you can use to help get to a certain goal, there's still a certain level of input you have to put in yourself that you can't just rely on the tool to tell you what to do.
Absolutely. The way the add-on is set up to kind of handle some of that is, in general, simulation craft is like, okay, you're going to use your cooldowns as fast as possible, so they come back up again as fast as possible, and all of that. But like in the add-on, you can use a key binding to turn your cooldown abilities on and off, so that you can hold them easily, and then you're like, oh, okay, we're in this phase, um, Lady Ashvane's shield just went down, so now I'm going to go ahead and use my cooldowns and burst as much as possible during that window. And there's not a similar mechanism directly in simulation craft.
I think end of the day you have to realize like you're not going to be able to just plug things into SimCraft or whatever and get the exact optimal thing to do and balance, your own capabilities in or whatever. You're not going to be able to make the right decision every single time on the first time and like just chill out, dude. I love the add-on because even if it's not telling me the exact right thing to do for my situation for every single thing, the important thing is that you're making a decision every global, honestly. So I don't know.
No, I agree with that. I think sometimes hesitating costs you more than just making a
Yeah.
suboptimal decision. That's definitely a factor. In terms of like encounters, like I could build in some connection between the add-on and boss mods and know more about the fight mechanics, but I mean, I think the state of rating and I think the comparison kind of holds up if you look at what's available in classic right now versus what current content looks like in retail. If you like, the fights are the mechanics, it's the new special designs that are built into a fight, the Ashvane bubble window, and you know doing your coral breaks properly and all of that kind of stuff, and all of that should entirely be a player decision. So that's why I don't try to do that for you. I don't try to make recommendations around that. I think you're always going to have to strategize with your raid. You're going to have to play based on sort of the dynamics of your raid, what your overall raid DPS is doing for you in terms of timings for mechanics and things like that. So um, it's it's not intended to take over your brain and replace you entirely and play the game for you. I know that's been a criticism. I've definitely been, asked, like, this thing is a crutch. Like, why does anybody need it? And it's like, I don't want anybody to need the add-on to play the game. Like, I wouldn't want anyone to be utterly dependent on it, but I want it to be a thing where it's nice to have it there so that you have some indication of where to jump back into your priority if you're doing something weird, if you're raid leading and you're yelling at who needs to go where in terms of shattering the corals or whatever might be happening as a raid leader, or you're crowd controlled and you're going to break out of crowd control and you want to be ready for what you're going to do the instant you come out of it. I want it to help you through what you do when you get back to just DPSing, and then you're still responsible for everything else that's going on.
I mean, I think a couple of things just jumping off of that is that one, even when we tell people to use Hekili, there's a lot of like, you got to know when to ignore it and do, something that's different for the encounter specific. And that's not a knock on the add-on. That's just sometimes situations are a little bit different and you gotta, adjust, right? Like you mentioned with Ashvane and stuff like that. Um, and at the end of the day, the mechanics are probably going to be a larger impact than like you hitting a button at the wrong time.
Right. It's definitely, and so yeah, it's not something that I want to build into the add-on. Like, if you're going to make your own choices in a fight based on those mechanics, if you're um, not thinking things through and you're not timing your cooldowns for Ashvane's shield phase versus the burn phase and things like that, that's going to have consequences, not necessarily for your DPS numbers, but about whether or not you get the boss kill. Like, that's always going to be on you as a player.
Yeah, I'll say, at least in regards to Red's a spec that's fortunate enough that we don't have too many abilities that really cause us to stop and say, maybe we shouldn't do that. Like, our exceptions are like our cooldowns, but that's like an exception for every spec. And things like Wake of Ashes and Execution Sentence. Other than that, because we have a pretty simple system of building and generating, there's no real stop to that. We only have those couple abilities that really require us to, maybe we should hold this for this next part of the fight or something similar. So it's a bit of a lesser shock when you have to do that compared to some specs
Right.
that might have to hold a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Rhett has a pretty clean design to it. The build and spend makes a lot of sense. Like, there aren't a lot of edge cases that you really have to plan for. Like, I think about enhancement shamans because, I love enhancement. Like, it you'll hear rules for enhancement shaman that are like, okay, make sure you have your weapon buffs up, have flame tongue up. If you spec for hailstorm, have frostbrand up. And then you know as it's falling off, you'll want to refresh those at a lower priority. And then at the end of enhancements priority list, they have, if there's literally nothing else you can do, go ahead and do an early refresh on flame tongue, because you have no other buttons that you can push at all. And then people use the add-on, and the add-on will reach that point, you literally have nothing else to do, so go ahead and do that early refresh. And they're like, well, this is too early. You're not supposed to refresh until you're in the pandemic window or whatever. And it ends up kind of confusing people a little bit because they think they're breaking a rule with their priority. But it's just pushing buttons is better than not pushing buttons. And that's the only button you could push. But it adds confusion where I think there's less of that with Rhett.
Yeah, speaking
Red is
of
very difficult.
oh, go ahead.
Said red is a very difficult spec.
To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand red.
Yeah. You ever played Inquisition, my dude?
Only a little bit. I have played very little Rhett in BFA. I have a 120 Rhett Paladin. That's as much as I can say for my progress in BFA.
It's not harder than it's ever been. It is the same as it's always been. Maybe that's just me.
I think there's some value there. I mean, I do feel like it's a pretty clean design. I think maybe not having something new that's really driving you to do something different can be a little disappointing. Like you always want things to feel fresh and new and different, but a lot can go wrong with that. So maybe safe and consistent is still pretty.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about Rhett is that when I die in a fight, that I'm buffing my friends who are playing Rhett Paladins,
Hmm.
which is rare. I almost never die in any fights ever, but uh, when I do, I'm still helping.
Me too. I raid lead better when I'm dead.
All right, and how about a more of a hard hitting question here as we gear up to go into our next subjects? So a lot of people right now, in general, they're just not happy with the game for various reasons. Do you ever feel because you've made an add-on now that you have like you have to keep playing the game to some extent? Is there like a responsibility that you feel?
You know what? That is a pretty hard hitting question. I do, to an extent, there is that. Like, I can't walk away for too long because I do have this tool I'm putting out there. It makes recommendations for how to play, and I don't want it to get outdated and give people bad recommendations. Like I do care about the quality of suggestions that the add-on is making to people, and a lot of that is impacted. Raid tier to raid tier. There are new trinkets, there are new mechanics that you have to plan around, and that I have to make sure the add-on is going to model. And if I just take a long break, um, that wouldn't necessarily, like, sometimes it doesn't have a negative impact, but it could. And so I do, I do stay more engaged because somebody's going to come asking me about, the weird new thing for Shadow Priest or whatever. And I have to have at least enough knowledge to model it and get decent recommendations out for whatever that situation might be. And so it does keep me engaged. And I recently sort of tweeted, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but I tweeted that looking at what's coming in 8.3 versus what's coming in Shadowlands, I could totally imagine just taking the year off and skipping 8.3 and waiting for Shadowlands. And some people responded to me and were like, "Well, what about the add-on? What about the add-on?" And I said, "Well, we're not seeing lots of class changes, so there's less for me to have to worry about keeping up with in the add-on. But I would still remain engaged with the game and make sure the add-on is working well."
I think it's kind of the same with writing a guide too, where it's like you really only need to be involved during PTR first of all more than it is on live, and then like a month after the tier is out, at least from a guide writing standpoint, like everything's pretty much set in stone. Like this is how the next tier is going to be, and then it's just like coasting from there. Outside of like this weird zeal change, I get almost everything done that needs to be done within like a month of a patch launching.
Yeah, that first month, and that's also the time where people are showing up to ask questions. I'm a moderator in Earth Shrine for shamans, and you have people showing up asking questions about, this item over that item, or whether the talents that we're going to pick are changing. And they actually, for enhancement, they changed a bit over the course of BFA. People are leaning more into ascendants now rather than elemental spirits and things like that. um, but also in that period, that first month, a lot a lot of hot fixing occurs. A lot of changes are occurring day to day, even, that mean like you always have to give recommendations with like a warning about the level of confidence you have for it, because,
Hmm.
well, if nothing changes between now and tomorrow, then you'll be wanting to pick ascendants. But something
Yeah.
it's entirely possible that something very dramatic could change. Although I'm talking about shamans, nothing dramatic is ever going to change. I shouldn't pretend, but for other specializations, for other classes, um, yeah, you have to be more wary.
Well, there's even times where it's like you think that going back to Simcraft, like you think that everything's working as it can be, but really, like, you're not gonna get the level of testing you need done until like the masses start using things and are like, why is this trinket showing as being so good for me when the charts say it's bad, and then you start looking at like basically what a clusterfuck the trinkets are, and it's not really anybody's fault, but for some reason they just weren't working the way that we thought that they were working. And all of that happens in like the first month. After that, it's like whatever, things are pretty chill for the rest of that patch.
Right. I mean, people have to realize like simulation craft isn't like, oh, we just, data mine the client
Boop,
and
boop, boop.
then
It's
simulation craft
done.
go. It's like, no, we have to go and we get to look at tooltips and see what the tooltip says happens, which is usually, 80% correct, maybe more. And then, we have the spell data that is data mined from the client and all of those pieces. And then we have PTR combat logs or, early launch combat logs where we have to look and say, okay, it says it's doing this. Is it is this trinket proc that ticks up? Is it ticking up? Is it actually hasted? Are we seeing it happen quicker, or is it depleting as fast as that? Like all of that ends up being not quite exactly what you would expect from the trinket or from the talent or from the spell, just
Or from
based
the potions.
right, just based on the 2 sentence blurb that they'll put in a tooltip.
And even if you get into the data mining, there's some things we find out that they're missing flags on skills. Like I know, like a common one for BFA was a lot of the skills are not listed whether the GCD is hasted or not for some reason.
Right, and then how that can subtly impact people because like right now I know haste and GCDs is a problem that's been identified for havoc demon hunters that are using the Guardian of Azeroth essence. Like apparently with massive amounts of haste that those havoc demon hunters will have, the Guardian will interrupt its own cast and end up doing less damage during those haste windows. And that would be something I would expect to see hot fixed fairly quickly since it's been identified. Sometimes those kinds of bugs are found in the community. They get reported to Blizzard and they get through QA and get resolved. And to me, it seems like bad that when you have a massive amount of haste, that your super powerful essence becomes weaker. So, but that kind of stuff does happen.
Or there's also the case early in BFA, some abilities they were double dipping haste for the GCD. Like we had Wake of Ashes, for instance, and Consecration too, but no one actually used that. So
Right. And that's actually, it's funny though, because we always have to be careful with those kind of edge case talents where it's like nobody's using this, so nobody's testing it anymore either. And then occasionally you find out, oh, well, actually, there is something powerful here. It is procking things too often, or, every tick of it is getting a chance to proc something rather than, working consistent with other mechanics. You never know if something that's like, hi, I'm a boring AoE effect is just doing boring AoE effect things, or if it's accidentally overprocking your trinkets or whatever.
yeah, Consecration was definitely one that was tested a lot early on. It hasn't been tested recently, but it's a weird effect because it's a ground spell like Death and Decay, and generally ground spells don't scale with haste, but Consecration does.
Right. Yeah, and
It's special.
I don't know if anything would have happened anytime recently with consecration that would change that. Like it's like one of those things where you have to always be vigilant because somebody's going to come at you with a log at some point and you'll be like, wait, what the heck is going on here?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I know you originally started off with the add-on because you were a shaman, and I know you were not playing a shaman currently.
Wow, just throw me under that bus.
It's okay. I don't play a paladin either, so
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like my experience with enhancement. I started with enhancement, of course, at a time when it was super overpowered and ridiculously cool. So, welcome to Throne of Thunder. Let's talk about, being a full healer on boss fights while you're also contributing more DPS than everybody else. Like it was just ridiculous, um, and fun, but overpowered. And then over time, I feel like enhancements just kind of been chipped away at. There was some time during Legion when it was kind of reworked, and you had the Doom Hammer and all the effects that were tied to Doom Hammer that really paid off pretty well. But there's just some weird stuff with it. It's back in a place where you can be competitive with it. Um, but the the mechanics of it, the maelstrom, I don't feel is great. I don't feel like the mastery and haste that kind of double dip on each other, and kind of it's a little bit overwrought that you have, mastery is giving you more stormbringers, haste giving you more stormbringers, and that basically when everything's going well for you, you only have one button to push repeatedly. It's kind of shifted away from something that's really fun for me, unfortunately.
Or I think you're playing Feral Druid now, is it?
Yeah, I am playing my Feral Druid. I managed to find one of the 3 raids that let you play Feral Druid, so that's been pretty good.
And what about Feral Druid do you like over like enhancement currently? Like what are some of the positives that you wish you had access to in a different spec?
So I don't think I would like port anything from Feral Druid over to Enhancement or anything like that. Like I do think they are just different designs, but Feral has a sane build and spend strategy to it. It has a lot of like interesting bits in the kit. The Primal Wrath edition as a talent was really cool. It's overpowered, but it's also a lot of fun. Um, as a when you play a druid, even though we now have these kind of like locked spec roles, and you don't really get to power shift and play, be an off tank in any kind of boss fights or anything like that. eh, Druids just have a lot of fun buttons. Like it's you can do more, you can handle more weird situations as a druid, than than you see in the enhancement kit.
Yeah, I think
It's
the
hard to articulate why something is just fun,
like
you
the
know?
one thing I really appreciate that Feral has is balance affinity.
Yeah, it's pretty huge. Being able to get that extra range and just melee, like it's a huge benefit in a lot, especially because melee range gets really cramped in a lot of encounters these days.
And it was very silly at the end of Legion when you also had legendaries to make that wider, and you could like thrash
Yeah,
for like
loofahs.
20 yards around you. Um, yeah, I mean they should probably do some thinking about melee ranges, because there's a number of boss fights when I shift into playing, anything but feral, anything that doesn't have extra range. And it's like you are inside the boss model. Like you don't get to see your feet because you're basically inside the boss model. And I don't think that's consistent with, what they want. I remember they moved in the max camera distance because they want you to be, seeing your character, seeing what's going on around your character. And for most of your melee, you're in a muddy cloud of spell effects, or you're inside the boss and you have no idea what's happening right where you are.
That's one thing that really annoys me on Ajara. Like when you want to attack the ad but you don't want to be in the rune to soak. It's like there's a very fine line there for melee.
And it's hard because that's also you're relying on your tanks to kind of keep the ad positioned as much as possible. Well, not for like the we call them dogs in my raid. Like all of the Naga that jump in on Ashara are just dogs. Um, and yeah, but like for anything that where tank positioning is going to impact that, you're really relying on tanks to help you out a lot.
And I guess one more thing about Feral, because I know I guess it's changed a little bit going from Legion to BFA. I know there's some people they've really enjoyed the slower playstyle of Feral and the bleeds and Now there's more faster paced specs. Where do you fall on that spectrum? What's your preference?
The slower paced people are just, I think they're very much into looking back, and they're wanting to relive, you know a period of time a long, long time ago. Like, I don't think any fights are really designed for waiting 3 to 4 seconds for your energy bar to fill up enough for you to hit shred. It's just not not the way the game is played now. Nobody wants to be a 30 actions per minute spec, period. And Feral, historically, that extra downtime wasn't something that where it was providing you that downtime because your next choices were going to be so complicated that you needed 3 seconds to think about what you might push next. You were just waiting to shred. Now, I mean, you can go back to like John freaking Madden, Wrath days and stuff like that, and there's complexity there, sure, but the weighting was never an asset. It wasn't something that was great for the spec, and it's not like something to be elitist about, like you hear from some folks. Like, it wasn't the greatest time for Feral. It was just, you know you could go refill your coffee between abilities, and come back to raid.
I love coffee
The
though.
Final Fantasy 11 strategies. Go make a sandwich and come back. You're still casting.
Yeah, it's just, there are, in theory, class designs, fight designs that let you have downtime, and where you need to like plan downtime and be able to use that downtime to carry out a strategy or something. But it's never been a real part of this game, as far as like.
So I think we got some good discussion in there about the add-on itself and some general things and opinions there on what you play now. So I guess we're gonna jump into 8.3 because 8.3 is what we have to look forward to in 2 months. Look forward in air quotes.
I was about to say, look forward isn't quite the word I'd use for it.
I will say there is a lot to look forward to in 8.3. The raid is going to be fun. Like, there's content that will be great. Like, this game is actually good at content. Raids are fun. The stuff that came out in 8.2 was fun. Now, the systems that we might have to interact with going forward, those raise a lot of questions for me about whether or not I'll have fun with it. But new fights are always a positive thing.
So I'll agree with you in general, but I feel like Old Year specifically had a score of awful fights that were just not fun for the majority of playing it. I mean, especially for Red, it was just, and like I don't know. I don't think that the raid encounters this expansion have been all that great, which is kind of contributing to the everything feeling worse than it necessarily.
I mean, I've chased flavor of the month around a bit this expansion, which may impact it. Like, I was a rogue on Zool, which, so I got to be ridiculous there, and that was fun. But I don't know. Has Rhett had an encounter where they got to shine?
Why? Why would you? Why do you
I
hurt
mean,
us?
as Shara is not bad for Rets because you get the deaths near the end, and you get those what's it called, the devotees, whatever the small AOE group is. You get to nuke those down pretty strong on that.
Yeah, so I mean, when you do have those opportunities, like, Blizzard has a history of not always talking to each other when they design a tier. Like, Tomb of Sargeras was Tomb of Soakers. Like, every fight had soak mechanics, and that made it so like you just wanted rogues for everything, basically, or anybody that could like immune one of those soaks. Um, but with good fight design in a raid tier, several different specs should have an opportunity to look really good, to have a lot of fun, kind of overperforming within that fight. Not so much that method is going to take 12 of them necessarily, but enough that you feel like you're contributing something special to that fight. And sometimes they nail it, and sometimes you're a spec that just hasn't had that opportunity for a long time, or there's just nothing in your kit that's special enough to design into a fight. So
Well, I feel like
it's a challenge.
melee have that issue all over the place because so many of the melee are pretty much the same, but just have a different. Because like enhance is largely similar to ret in a lot of ways. I mean, less so now with some of the Azerite changes and stuff, where we get that little stronger AOE burst and whatnot. But like, I mean, monks they just do their thing in melee, and they don't have a lot outside of what Ring of Peace I think is the big one. And so
So
like,
ring
there's
is pretty cool, but yeah, I mean that you're not necessarily not. Oh my goodness, you're not necessarily going to feel amazing about getting to use Ring of Peace in a fight, but like for Feral, doing Mechatork was cool because I could root all of the bots and things like that, and that makes that encounter way easier. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right in a lot of ways. Many of the melee specializations are just like reskins of the same thing, that just do a different damage type, unfortunately. So maybe that'll be something that'll get fixed later.
I think one of the big melee problems right now, like the differences that do exist, they make a pretty big difference. Like the classes that really they have more of a passive type AOE, where their AOE is like built into their abilities, or their AOE is actually improving their single target. And Ret as a spec where that is not true, and we're seeing a lot more fight designs that benefit that type of design.
Yeah, I mean, being able to kind of just incidentally do optimal AoE while you do the exact same thing you would do single target is pretty nice. I imagine that's got to feel good. It does feel good because I play Havoc as an ult.
I mean, Havoc's what I spend most of my time on, and like it feels good when it's there, and when it isn't, it just doesn't feel great. But I mean, that's what it is.
Well, and Havoc has the advantage of being new and not having a lot of baggage. I mean, any baggage it
Yeah.
has is just that everything was stolen from Demonology or other specializations.
I mean, they got to steal everything from every specialization.
Yeah, I think they have too much. I mean, I've thought
Absolutely.
about class and spec design, and that Havoc and probably Rogues have too expansive of kits, uh, and it's probably something where some of the things that they just have all the time probably need to actually be talent choices. So they're making some decisions about what they have and not just able to do everything in every fight all the time.
I think one thing that could benefit like encounter design, it seems like a lot of encounter design, like they're kind of like stuck in one mindset of how melee mechanics work. Melee mechanics are you move out of this stuff, or someone gets a debuff and they have to go to Africa. There's there's not a lot of differentiation between mechanics like that, where they could use different type systems where, okay, maybe you do have to do something different, you have to sacrifice your damage, but maybe because you did a mechanic, there's a reward for you individually, rather than the reward being that you help your raid kill the boss. Just individual aspects that can make a player actually want to do a mechanic for things other than loot or titles.
Right. So that that your best logs aren't necessarily just the ones where all the mechanics just happen to miss you, but instead you got hit by a mechanic and you managed it right and it was rewarding.
Yeah.
I think the biggest one right now for me is that so many of the melee mechanics are that you just have to go out and stand somewhere and do nothing while the mechanic, and like that just straight up doesn't feel good.
What they need to do is take some of those like arcane chest lock puzzles and let you do one of those instead of running away.
Like I think like a good design of that was in BOD for the, I don't remember the name of the fight. The monk and the mage. Jadefire Masters. There we go. Like it stopped you from doing damage. You had to do the puzzle, but if you do the little looking puzzle right, you get a damage buff.
Please
The
no.
only counter to that though is that if you didn't do it right, you would die, and so there really wasn't a whole lot of.
I know I'm the minority, but like
I'm not saying we all get sent into the air for every mechanic. I'm saying it had a reward for doing the mechanic properly. This type of behavior
That's
in general.
fair.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, having a reward for executing things properly feels good. You see it built into some kits now. You interrupt, you get some resources, or you dispel your enemy, and you get some resources. Like, there's some payoff there. With Jadefire Masters, like, I'm not a huge fan of it, like launching you into a vehicle, and it's about you doing this little um, uh, like action arcade thing for 4 seconds and then you're back into it. Like, it would be nice if some of the risk and reward were part of your spec design, part of your kit, that you can mitigate something a certain way using your own abilities rather than having it be something that comes from being pulled out into a vehicle and doing what the vehicle requires of you.
This also just triggered
one
me.
caveat on Yeah, because I want to say, like, Karma and Shield of Vengeance are examples of I think that kind of thing, but those a lot of time end up being, let me go soak this damage I don't have to, so that I can get some more.
Right.
I forgot to use Shield of Vengeance when bubbles were being soaked, so I guess I'll just go stand in some coral for a second.
True strats, but I was telling you, like, there's even fights before Jadefire. Even I just remembered that Will of the Emperors was a thing where you got the buff for doing the little dance thing correctly.
And that was good, right?
Yeah.
I love that. That was amazing. And especially with something like tanks had to do too, and so it's not like tanks just sit there and get hit a lot of times and like cool down through damage.
I like that because, like, if I messed it up, I probably was gonna live. But everybody definitely knew that I was not good at it.
Well, I mean, it's good because you can not like execute it 100% and cause your whole raid to wipe
Yes.
necessarily, but like early in progression when you're needing everyone to squeeze out every bit of DPS, then you really want the vast majority of your raid team to execute it properly and get that damage. And later on in farm, like, it's not as big of a deal if you mess up. So I do kind of wonder if when they come up with something like that that's cool and fun and people like it, if they just get paranoid of overusing it, so they put it on the shelf and then they forget to ever use it again for like 5 years. Because we should see more of that.
Yeah, I think, like, Mr. Pandaria, they really had some, like, I would say, like, new and interesting fight designs, and it's gotten a little bit stale since then, kind of, in my opinion.
That was my favorite expansion for boss fights. I love so many of the things they did in there.
No, I think
Like,
Legion was
I
also
missed-
really good, but I mean, going from Legion to BFA is kind of
Yeah. I mean, like, I understand that big downtime isn't always the most fun, but things like what was it, Windlord, the guy with the blades, I guess.
Yeah.
When you ran down his corridor, like, that
Watching
was kind
people
of
get
cool
stuck.
when everyone's. Yeah, it's not the fun for every encounter, but it's not that bad. And they used it for oh god, what's the one in Antaurus? The
Iminar.
bounty hunter guy,
Yeah.
Iminar, right? Like, and that was kind of fun running across it. I mean, the mythic version I think was a little bit crazy and a little bit too tight on a lot of it, but it was still like it's fun where it's like, okay, take a breather, just run down to this end and don't die, and like that's kind of fun. And it doesn't matter, what kind of class you are for the most part on that one.
Well, and there's even some like DPS decisions to make, because if you are not paying attention to what you're doing and you're like, oh, I'm going to pop all my cooldowns right before the running phase,
Are you attacking
then
me again?
I've definitely blew like Crusade, and then it's like, oh shit, he's jumping in 10 seconds. Well,
Yeah, the worst part is that you get to run down that hallway with your giant glowy wings out.
everyone sees you.
Which, I guess is, you're right. It's, you shouldn't have hit your cooldowns, and everybody should know that you messed up.
So I like how this segment began with, so let's talk about what's coming up in 8.3 and how Miss of Pandaria was the best.
Yep.
Speaking of Mr.
and
Pandaria,
also-
does anyone miss doing dailies for a month and never doing them again?
Okay, you know
Sounds the
what? Look,
best.
I would do dailies every day for a month if it meant I didn't have to do the fucking AP grind for the rest of the
Same.
hands down,
I
without a doubt.
just I just really don't want to have to help the Volpera still.
I
But what
mean,
about the turtle?
if you're gonna bait me into it, like AP and like these retention mechanisms disguised as game mechanics, like I would just really like it if we could just not have those, because if you want people to keep playing, like convince them that playing alts is fun, and then they'll play the same content over and over again on different characters and they'll stay subbed, I promise.
This is where I
Every
remind you that Ion
but
told us the only KPI that matters is fun.
so like
And the
in
more you
previous
play the game, the more fun you have.
but like the most
Uh-huh.
fun thing that I personally have in especially in older expansions was like picking up a second character and like experiencing some of the content from a different like what do these encounters feel like while you're healing or while you're ranged or while you're tanking or something like that. Like just playing the game from a different perspective or even just a different set of class mechanics is like a huge amount of fun for me, but now I have to spend 3 months playing the game just to get the right Azerite, the right essences, the neck level grind up, just to get a second care. It's wow.
And
Hate
then you go for 3 weeks grinding out Mythic Plus on your undergeared alt or whatever, and you gamble for an Azerite piece, and nope.
I mean, like this leads into one other major problem I have, which is how much of your character's power and mechanics are not part of your specific class. So it's things like, um, I don't know, Light's Decree, and that like that just straight up isn't part of your base kit, and it's a very large power increase. Empyrean Power is a nice ability to have; it's really fun. But like when you hit level cap, you just straight up don't have it.
This is one thing that
Um,
Rin actually talked about early on in BFA. Like, Ret's great and all, but what if you strip away these extra things? How does Ret play at a base?
Well, I think
Pretty bad.
that's every like sure some are better or worse about how does it play, but I mean just looking at logs, if you go look at someone's damage breakdown right now, what percentage of a player's damage breakdown comes from trinkets, azurite pieces, and your just like straight up damage procs from it too, not even like, other buffs that you get from those effects. And I'd be willing to bet that some of that is, 25, 30% or more of your actual damage and the things that you do are coming from things that aren't even your class or spec or whatever.
And that you don't really have control, and that you don't make intelligent decisions about.
Yeah, because I mean, like half of them are just procs, right? Look at
Yeah.
what's a Crucible of Flame does a decent amount of damage, and it's just a dot. And like, don't get me wrong,
Expurgation
some of those
calls.
things are nice. Yeah, it's I don't know. It frustrates me from like I want to be in control of my own damage, and I don't want to have to like get these things after I hit max level, and like they're not decision. Like there's just so many things wrong with it that it drives me insane. How much of this stuff isn't part of you or your character or your class, even if they're like thematically tied into it, it's still through your Azurite pieces.
And if Azurite was the only thing, that would be it would be fine, right? But it's not. It's like kind of all the systems work like that right now.
It's really challenging, I think, from a design sense, kind of thinking about where the developers are probably coming from on this. Like, it's really challenging to make it so that something feels like a reward that's giving you something nice to play with versus being something that should be integral to your kit, that you're just unfinished if you don't have it, that you can't perform if you haven't already gotten it. Um, and I mean, part of that is just that Azurite is an over functioning feature that replaced legendaries and sets, and has to have a special acquisition pathway because they need to throttle you from getting all of it. And so it just there's too much tacked on to Azurite and its acquisition, um, for it to also be so game changing that that you just feel miserable if you can't get your proper traits after a month or 2 months.
And I think like set bonuses kind of hit that same issue, which I mean, this is a bit of a tinfoil hat moment, but I think that's one of the reasons they kind of moved away from it, and was that like every tier there was a new set bonus, and they were really strong because they want you to feel good about getting them. But also they're so strong that if you don't have them, you feel bad for not having them, and like you're missing a piece of your spec interaction without it.
See, I partially agree with that. I think part of it is that Blizzard has done some over fixing. I think they had the issue in Legion where, as of oh my god, uh, Suramar, whatever the raid was called now, I'm blanking.
Nighthold?
You had, yeah, thank you, Nighthold. You had, you could potentially have 6 pieces of tier. You had your artifact locking out your weapons, and then you had potentially 2 legendaries as well, and you probably had a critical trinket that you had to be using. And so they ended up making it so you had almost no flexible gear slots for pursuing other upgrades. And so they're like, "Oh, we'll fix that in BFA, and we'll narrow that down to 3 gear slots." And it's just
4 with the
it
neck.
right. So I think they just overdid it. I do think that in terms of gear sets, like there were other options to repair it that you can kind of see in like benthic gear, where they have special effects that help you out, but they're zone locked. And they could do some of that where getting the gear from a particular raid helps you within that particular raid, and you don't have to worry about making those mechanics work literally everywhere in the game if you're worried about keeping it balanced. That way they don't have to just like shut off set bonuses entirely at the end of an expansion. They can be like, yeah, go collect that, go wear your tier 15, and have those set bonuses when you go back to that raid. And it's not something that you're going to want to put on gear that's like 200 item levels lower for a set bonus in current content.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the trinket system for Mantorus. Like they had like, if I remember right, there was 2 effects. There was one that worked everywhere, and there was one that was just in raid only. But I
So
think
I
yeah,
mean, that's so the thing with Benthic specifically, because this is another issue that gets me, is that Benthic is like a go solo grind and get this, and it's really strong in the raid kind of deal, instead of like the was it the set from Dazarlor, where it's like, hey, while you're in the raid, you've got more stats if you got the I think it's Cloak and Ring or something
yeah,
like that. And like I
right.
thought that was a much better way of doing it than Benthic.
Oh sure, I wouldn't want to see those like special raid effects from a benthic like system, but the effects themselves being zone locked was, I think, smart. There were all sorts of flaws with benthic, and I think at BlizzCon they said like the procs for having like sockets and stuff like that were a mistake. um, and but you see other mechanics like in what they did in Eternal Palace was you'd have casters with the trinket and melee with the pole arm from Savara getting that combo effect. So like as we go into Nyalotha, we're going to find ourselves like if I never get a new weapon drop on my druid and I don't replace my pole arm sometime soon, I'm going to start losing damage because there aren't going to be casters that are debuffing my targets that I get extra damage from. Um, it is a sneaky raid locked effect, just because people are going to gear up and no longer help me proc that extra damage.
and I think a big problem is I think they feel like at some point they feel like they have to keep on redesigning things to keep people interested, and there's just a very large lack of evergreen systems.
I mean, I personally really like when things change from tier to tier. And so, like, set bonuses were a really great way to do that, right? Like, oh, now, this ability in your rotation that nobody used maybe gets a bit more light or something changes. The variety's good, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I do like things that kind of freshen up and shake up the meta a little bit and encourage you to do things a little bit differently. For me, like on the other end of the spectrum, there are things like upcoming in 8.3 and the corruption system and so forth, where it's just like I look at that, and not only is it new and I have to like sort of learn the system and see if I can optimize it effectively, but I also know that it's more or less going away at the end of 8.3. So it's like, okay, here's this whole new thing that should be like fresh and different and exciting to get to engage with. And I'm like, am I really going to want to just go and like wash the corruption off 90% of what drops for me in the next raid in order to avoid, accidentally killing myself in every raid fight? Like, is that exciting and fresh, or is that just not a great design?
What gets me too is it's like they usually don't get a new system like that right on the first try. So it's not even like we're gonna be like, oh, well, next time they'll do their corruption mechanic better. So it's just like, why? Why are you adding a new system? For what purpose?
And why does it have to have so many moving parts to make
Yes.
effective? Like, you have to have.
When objectively we have too many moving parts already for like this expansion. There's more than there's ever been.
Yeah, it's
I think that's
In my
definitely
part of the
opinion.
point I was trying to make earlier. When you have your Azerite pieces, you have your neck on top of that, and there's other things that start adding different moving parts to your gear in every which place, and it's just so much.
yeah. It's like some of the things they say and what they do, like they're entirely different worlds. Like they're continually saying they want people to look at a piece of gear and know it's an upgrade, but they're creating all these systems that have increasing complexity that go on top of your corruption, on top of your Azerite essences, on top of your Azerite traits, on top of your trinkets, on top of your rings and sockets, and there's just more and more layers. And it's really defeating that their goal was to not have to second guess whether or not an level upgrade is an upgrade or not. We're going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I know it's been said that they kind of they know that everybody's going to sim anyway, so they're less stressing about upgrades being instantly identifiable. But I feel like that's a mistake, because it used to be with Blizzard games in general that like getting into the game and playing the game was easy. Like it's easy to get started, and then it gets harder to master. There are optimizations you can make. There are things that you can pick. There's the right gear, the right talents, those kinds of selections that will let you optimize to it to a higher level. But we keep getting more and more gear and systems where it's hard to tell what you're going to get out of them performance wise based on the information that the game itself presents to you. And I think that's bad.
Well, I think one of the comments, and this is coming from a bit of a different game though, but say I think it was League of Legends specifically. They're like, well, the first thing you do when you're playing the game, and you pick a hero, is you go to a third party website and find out what the right build is. And for some people, that's just not the right thing to do or the thing that they want you as the player to do when you load up. And I think, like, I totally agree with Blizzard games specifically. It shouldn't be that your first response is to go ask somebody how to play it optimally. There should be enough information in it to at least give you like a good direction to go in. And if you want to start looking at stuff on top of that, like that.
I think I shouldn't have to have a mini guide that a new person should read before they read my actual guide. Like that's kind of like here's the quick guide so you can get all of the basics so you can start to learn these 10 other pages you're required to read to understand how to make good choices.
I look forward to your guide on guides, actually. That'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Ret FAQ.
Yeah, but it's a lot for like somebody new. I
I mean, they've
agree.
like you were saying, with you want to know an upgrade, like just getting a cool weapon drop that has like a corruption effect, and it's even a corruption effect that you want. You'll be mid raid, and what you want is slam on the enchant that you kept saved in your bag and equip that thing. And now you're going to have to consider, oh, wait, that just pushed me up 20 more corruption or whatever. And now I'm going to have these other effects hitting me. And so now I have to decide, okay, do I have an alternate leg piece to replace that's not going to have corruption on it? Or am I going to go scrub this bonus effect off of my legs so that I can use my new weapon? And am I going to make my raid wait for me while I go do that because I have to go all the way back to hang out with Mother in the heart of Azeroth to make that happen? And am I going to regret it after I get another upgrade that replaces, my gloves and drops the corruption from there? Um, and now I want that effect back that I permanently washed off my pants. Like there again, you have the moving pieces, but you have these traps where you're going to make permanent decisions that will piss you off when it backfires later on.
I foresee, like, if you get a piece that has like your top tier corruption, there's gonna be a lot of gear hoarding rather than purifying.
I mean, that's the
I was just gonna say, like, things have gotten so complicated at this point that you're not gonna think about it. You're not gonna be making choices. You're gonna throw it into Raidbot, say, this is the amount of corruption I want. Give me the best result with that amount of corruption.
sure.
You know?
And there will be an additional option next to that where it's like purify items if needed or not. Like
Yep.
you'll have to make that kind of choice, and the correct answer is that yes, you're going to just want alternative pieces for everything that don't have corruption on it so that you can rebalance all of your gear as needed. But it's not the fun kind of gear optimization. Like even when in Legion, when you were like, okay, so I'm going to want to get my 4-piece set bonus, and also I kind of want to be able to keep my 2-piece from the prior tier. Like that was a little excessive in my opinion. Like you shouldn't have been able to have 3-tier set bonuses going, but it was interesting, and it wasn't too overcomplicated. You got
Yeah.
the pieces, but now it's just they hated reforging because you would have to go get a calculator and reforge all your gear.
But
And
that's what we're doing now.
now that's what we're doing, but we also have to go to Raidbots. By the way, Raidbots is amazing. When I say, like, when I make it sound like it's bad to go to Raidbots, it's not. Raidbots is such a critical service, and I'm not like paid to say that or anything. But it's like you were saying, you don't want to have to use a third party tool outside the game. Third party tools inside the game are great, like add-ons. Um, but you don't want to have to go outside the game like when you get a reward, like getting a reward and then not knowing that it's a reward, that it's actually good, or finding out that it's terrible is a crappy feeling. It's not a good design. My real world profession is that I am a clinical therapist. I have a professional license in as a social worker, but I can do therapy and all that kind of stuff. So be very alarmed by that. But you undermine the feeling of reward if you give somebody something and they can't tell what it is. They can't tell that it's valuable at all. It's like, okay, this could be the most amazing thing that I've ever wanted, or it could be crap. And in this game, with the volume of rewards that you receive, it's most likely going to be more crap.
Yeah. It's just, you're not making fun, like, rewarding or complicated systems when they're so complicated that you just throw numbers at a calculator and do whatever the result is. I think.
I feel like there should be, a rough idea of like, oh, this, it might not be an upgrade, but if I see it and be like, oh, it's close, and I want to get that like nth degree optimization, and you go to third party tools, I personally don't have a problem with that level of it.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh, hey, I have this piece that's crit verse or a piece that's haste mastery, I've got a rough idea of which one's probably going to be better if other
I
things
think
are the same.
I think it's good to be able to quantify something that's good. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
sure.
Like, I know this is good. I want to find out how good it is and how can I make it better with all the other things that I have. But this is just like it is reforging but worse. And yeah, you just have something. You have computer spit out a result at you, and you just do what it tells you to do, and that's not fun.
Hey,
I
now
wasn't a
you're calling
fan
me
of
out.
reforging.
Reforging was actually all right because reforging did the opposite of this. Reforging let you take gear that wasn't going to be optimal and turn it into at least something useful for yourself. And so to me that was a positive. Like it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
taking all gear where sometimes it's not good, and I'm making it so it's at least kind of decent. Whereas you have we're looking forward where it's like, oh, gear could drop and be really amazing for you, but probably not. And in order to even use some of it, you might have to remove this really cool new reward in corruption, because otherwise you're going to kill yourself trying to use it.
And I think I would, for a moment, like to be fair and say part of the reasons that we didn't sim so much back then was because it wasn't as accessible. So, like, that also is a problem I would like to acknowledge. Like, we do it because we can now. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that, like, you also kind of have to at this point.
That's just a testament to how good raid bots is.
Yes.
Like, it is
It
so good
is.
that I stopped running SimCraft locally and just used raid bots as soon as
Can't
it was
relate.
up.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I really need to use Simulation Craft for locally are, first of all, like the tool that I have that tells me about priority updates, which is still kind of done for me, thanks to somebody built that out for me. And then if I'm trying to do sims for an encounter design, like I was talking about, where like you'll put in like, oh, here's Orgazoa with spawns every, starting at 20 seconds, and they respawn every 30 seconds or whatever. Like those kinds of raid events as a Top Gear kind of comparison at this point have to be run locally rather than on raid bots. But that's a pretty exceptional case. Like almost everybody is going to
You're
be
kind of
completely
being
satisfied.
extra at that point, right? Which, like,
Well,
power to you.
yeah, and that's kind of the thing, is what I would want out of raid bots, out of third party outside the game tools. Like I want that to be something like, yeah, at the end of the raid night or at the end of the raid week,
Mm-hmm.
I'll go and see if I need to rebalance my gear and fuss with it. I don't want to need to do it between fights because I got that sword and
Yeah.
I need to know if the corruption's going to kill me or not.
And doing loot council, like, it's a nightmare because you're waiting for, like, if a ring drops, we're gonna be there for like at least 15 minutes because I have to chase after people and be like, you need to go sim this so you can quantify it so I know who to give this to.
I mean,
And it's like every fight.
at least sometimes you can't even trade it, so that makes it easy, right? That's the best part of
Yeah.
personal loot.
Well, like, rings are the worst because, like, somebody will bid minor upgrade and it's like, but it's 35 item levels. And they're like, yeah, it's 3 DPS.
Oh, it's because it doesn't have a socket, probably.
Well, it's a ring, so. And this ring has mastery on it, and I don't like mastery, I like verse. Like stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other rant, but. Anyway.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. They have to touch on the corruption system somehow. Like maybe instead of just completely purifying the piece, it downgrades that one tier, and you have like an essence you could use in the future, maybe, or something similar. So you're
Can I
not
just
getting the
stick it
full
in an
benefit, but you're
pool
getting
and
something out of it
corrupt
still.
it
You're not
again?
just throwing it away.
Because you can cleanse it, right? Is that what we were
Yeah,
saying? I don't.
yeah.
But you can't re-corrupt it?
No.
Right.
Why
And
can't I
so
just make it icky?
that's the thing, is like what they could have done, what the options they kind of had were things like they could have done it as corruption suppression rather than purifying it, so that you can
Yeah.
turn that corruption effect off and then turn it back on later. Or they could have made that purity stat, that endless trait and everything associated with it in the cloak, they could have made it so that's a budget where, okay, you got a sword that has a corruption effect, you have a certain amount of purity, you can spend points of purity towards using that effect, or activating a different effect on gear, like that it's something that procs as a potential effect and then you have a budget of points to activate those effects. Like, there were other approaches to corrupted gear that doesn't make corrupted gear naturally bad for you as it drops.
Which I think is one of the bigger problems I have with personal loot, when like it genuinely feels bad when gear drops for a number of, and corruption just amplifies that problem in my head.
Yeah, I mean, getting bad rewards like is worse than just getting no rewards. Like, people would chase achievements for no reward. But if you're chasing achievements and getting garbage, like, it's like, oh, neat, garbage. Um, like, even like when you're doing progression and a boss drops 6 cloaks for your raid, like, even if those are good cloaks, you're just like, oh, neat, lots of cloaks, that's super cool. You want the rewards to feel at least sort of exciting and fun. And this will happen. That'll still happen with corruption sometimes. It's just, how often is it going to feel great, and how often is it going to be like, oh, neat, I got to do some chores before I can figure out if I can, put on a belt.
Just don't wear pants, and then you won't have to wear a belt.
Done and done.
And I have to say that my favorite part of removing corruption is that it does cost us mementos that you could otherwise save to buy your free socket. They're really making me pay for it.
Hold on, you're telling me that to get rid of this corruption that is a failure in the drop in the first place, you then have to spend a resource that you're getting and spending on something to allow you to actually use the piece of gear that dropped for you.
Correct. It's a very small amount, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like worry too much about that aspect. It is a really cheap cost. It's not meant to be a barrier, but at that point, it's like,
Why would
why
you do
have
it anyway?
Yeah.
The age-old question to Blizzard. For what purpose?
But why?
But why?
But yeah, I mean, I do think that they're on the right track. Like, what you can see in the 8.3 designs with the endless trait, which, if in case anybody isn't aware, the endless trait increases your purity, or whatever we're calling that, so that you're more resistant to corruption. You'll be able to use more gear that has corruption effects on it over time as you put points in that trait. So, I mean, what you see are mechanics that are designed to increase the lifespan of the tier, and that may or may not have to do with the fact that it looks like we're probably going to have an 11-month tier in 8.3. But you'll also be able to buy sockets for your gear, with a large amount of those same resources that you would use for purifying corruption.
I'm trying to. They still have a couple months. I'm trying to see what happens.
Yeah, so also, I zoned out there. So you mentioned the infinite trait. We have to work with that. And there's also the legendary cape that we're going to have to grind on, too. Because they're adding corruption resistance to that now as well.
Right.
Yeah, I will.
And
Well, go ahead.
oh no, your turn for sure.
Oh, I was just saying, like, it's still. I think it's a lot better than what we've had earlier in the expansion, and like, there's obviously a lot of unhappy people with the state of BFA, and so like, I'm still optimistic about where these things are going, even if we're complaining about.
It's nice that they're trying things. Like, there are
Yeah.
definite positive parts of it. I think that when they are saying, "Hey, in 9.0 we're going to be more alt friendly, but in 8.3 we're going to add an endless grind," like, it's incongruent, and that doesn't excite me a whole.
And I think also it's worth being this loud and grumpy about it now because it is a couple months out and they still can do something about it, you know? So,
Yeah,
I
I
don't know. I think
will.
it's important.
I mean, I'm not a game designer. I'm a person that's just invested way, way too much of my life in this game.
Same.
Um, And so like they're designing the game. As a player, my responsibility is just to enjoy what I enjoy, give feedback about what I might not enjoy, and to give feedback about what I do enjoy in a game. And they can use it, dismiss it, they can like it but not do anything with it. Like that's that the ball's in their court for all of that. I feel like some of the things that could be really cool with corruption would be even better if it was sort of like I said, like if you had a budget to spend on corruption and you were increasing that budget over time, so that you know rather than like, oh, I get more and more resistant to corruption as we get further out into the tier, it's that you're more prepared to experiment with higher levels of corruption. And somebody doing encounters with like 50 corruption is crazy and awesome. And it's not just because they did their world quests every day for 6 months. Like that it's a risk that they selected for themselves and that they're performing really well to earn that.
Yeah, bring back raid-wide buffs that can be tuned up or down or whatever every week. I think that would be good.
Raid Mythic Plus, it is inevitable. It will happen, not in 9.0, but eventually you're going to have Mythic and you'll be able to just turn it up. Like just literally just tune up.
Oh,
Like
no.
That's
you'll have a
absolutely
fixed raid
not what I
size.
meant, but
Yeah, no, please don't.
Yeah.
It will be great because it will give like method and limit. They'll be like going out and doing like Mythic 15 whatever, while everybody else in the world is like, cool, we're clearing Mythic within 4 months. That's
I just feel like that's the same problem with the infinite grind though. Like you feel like you're never finished with. Like, can you imagine right now killing Mythic Ashara and being like, okay, Savara on +1, let's do this. Let's see what happens now. Like,
I think it would be
No.
fine if it
and like
there was a cap on the item level. Yeah.
so the counterpoint though is that I mean I guess Mythic Plus kind of works in one direction where you can see people are doing it that way, but like Final Fantasy had it where initially that hard mode content like just straight up didn't give any gear rewards and nobody.
No, that's totally fair. I think it would be cheap as something that literally is just tuning up the mechanics and your healing requirements and so forth. And I wouldn't like it would purely be like an achievement mode in my brain. And I'm not even saying that it's a good idea,
It's
but that
just
it
probably
feels like
something that's crossed their mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's somewhere on a whiteboard somewhere.
Probably. I mean, even as just a joke. And I just want to say I was saying like, ye old every week the instance gets nerfed by 1% or something,
Chill of the Throne,
And instead,
Sunwell
instead like you have a higher corruption tolerance or whatever,
Yeah, I mean that is something. It's funny because whenever they've talked about those mechanics since Wrath, they've always viewed them as negatives and problematic. We shouldn't have to put a raid aura out that's going to impact you in that way. But they're still doing it. It's just they hide it in other systems now.
And I
Well,
think
like,
for especially corruption, it's like it's kind of perfect in my opinion. Like I hate it when they're like, no, we don't do that, so we're not going to do it, and we're going to leave the system worse than it would be if we did that. Does that make sense?
I think some of the new systems that are clever and useful would be better off if they weren't also trying to mask that progressive nerf.
Well, back in the day, the reason they said that they don't like that is they don't want it to feel like you won because the content got nerfed. They want it to feel like you won because you got better or something along. And so things like, hey, you've got more gear from time to time, or this infinite grind that you've been grinding away week to week. Everybody in the raid got a level, and now you're all stronger and went at it, and like that's okay. But I feel like corruption just goes back to the old, where it's like it's hard, and now you're just.
Yeah. I think it's a good, like, oh god, this isn't looking how we wanted it to look for corruption, and we have to do something about it. I think it's a good. I don't think they should do that always, but I think specifically in this case, it would help, especially because so many. I really do think a lot of people are just gonna quit.
I'm not gonna say I haven't thought about everything. Look at
If
8.3 and you're
I
like, eh.
Yeah, if I didn't love the people I played with so much, it would be without a doubt.
If at BlizzCon they did not explicitly state that there was
Mm-hmm.
going to be no AP grind in Shadowlands, I would have just immediately been like, it's just not worth it. I have nothing to look forward to because I hate the AP grind. I'm just not going to do it.
Well, so for Shadowlands, like I don't want that like no AP grind announcement to be like Ghostcrawler promised me a pony.
Yeah,
Like it's you're going to be grinding for anima, which is going to be your crafting mat. And so it's kind of like shifting towards a little bit of a different grind. Like you're going to want materials to make upgraded gear, but you're getting to have more granular control over how you spend the points that you're farming up. It could be done really well. Like I think it's really promising. I feel
it
like there's
is.
a lot of potential in Shadowlands based on their announcements. I really look forward to seeing more concrete changes.
We'll see when alpha and
Absolutely.
beta start.
Well, and it's like I don't want it to just be anima power, right, with a
Mm-hmm.
different coat of paint. Because
I
like
think.
a capped weekly grind that you have to keep up on every week is almost worse than what we have.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
think, I mean, I really, if I could go and like Jedi mind trick the developers into anything, it would be that I want them to really rethink the time gating and how they implement it, because um I want to be able to play on a sane schedule for my life. I want people that spend 10 hours playing the game to be able to get roughly the same, whether it's 2 hours, 5 days a week, or 10 hours on Saturday. You know, I don't, I feel like they could open things up more so it's like conquest. So, like, there's a progressive cap that things unlock over time. And then once you reach that point in time, um, everybody could just farm up things and catch up. Not being able to catch up is such a mental block for me in this game, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
I
Agreed.
think that it's not that he said we're not going to have an AP grind. I think it's the fact that he finally said we understand the negative social pressure that AP puts on people. Whereas before that point, they've always said, well, just don't grind, forehead. You know,
Just a game.
I think that is the single most reassuring thing that he said. Whether that comes true or not, we'll see. But it certainly turned me from I don't know how long I'm going to be able to play this game for physically to, let's see what beta looks like.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly places to still be concerned about and look at, but it is the
Mhm.
amount of hope and like looking forward to it is at a point where it's like, okay, I can be happy with this, or I can be ready for this, or like something along those lines. You know what I mean?
It's again, like, as we talk fairly cynically about 8.3, like, I'm still willing to have hope about the game when we talk about
Yeah.
Shadowlands. And I'm hoping that pays off. I don't think like the devs are out to like give us something that's internally a mess and unfun and just force me to like it against my will or something. Like I do believe they want to put out a great game. They want to correct mistakes of the past. I think that their development cycle means sometimes like correcting the mistakes of the past means 9.0 builds off of Legion rather than, you know, um, like there's a cycle. Like it feels like things skip an expansion. And so there's potential there, and they're willing to actually kind of abandon something that, I mean, I would guess that AP in terms of retention and providing metrics for that is probably pretty important. And the fact that they're willing to sacrifice it suggests that there's some real potential.
I mean, there's longer term reward structures and like discussions around it to happen too, right? If you say you have to log into the game to farm AP versus, hey, log into the game and just have fun and enjoy logging in. Like the two different mentalities are different and create different player behaviors and reward systems and stuff. So like I know I've looked at stuff that's like, hey, if you give people a reason to farm this thing, they're going to like doing it less than if they just did it because they enjoyed it and had fun.
Yeah, I think there is an element in WoW where, like, if you look at, Classic, which is remaining pretty popular, and they put out numbers saying that it drove a huge subscriber increase and all of that. Classic, you can pick at and play the parts of the game that you like, and you can mostly escape the rest of it. Of course, if you're like, seriously, I'm making air quotes now, progression rating in Classic, like there's farming up, consumables and so forth that may not be super enjoyable to you. But outside of that, like you don't have to participate in every single game system. Um, as they do things presently, like for essences, like if for some specs you are needing to go into Mechagon repeatedly after you might be over Mechagon, if you want to farm up your Visions essence or whatever, um, or do a ton of PvP if you're not a PvPer. And like there's some value in kind of encouraging people to try different parts of the game, but I feel like they could probably slow their roll a little bit in terms of trying to force people into um, every part of the game all the time. The only thing that they don't really force on you would be pet battles.
Yeah, that's one
Thank
thing I was
God.
gonna bring up here in a moment. You started there, like it's the thing, like when they want people to dip their toes in something like PvP, it's not like a gentle nudge, like hey, check this out, like sort of like how those I would call like those battleground event things, not like the bonus XP, but like the brawls. They're like a little bit of a different aspect to it that makes you want to try it out. But then doing things like essences, like Blood of the Enemy or Conflict and Strife, they're not, hey, check this out. It's like, hey, we're going to stick you in here for a few weeks and make you do this content kind of deal. It falls into that social pressure category. It's not an AP grind, but they're forcing you into a different part of the game that if you don't want to play, you don't want to play it. Like, for example, I don't have even rank 1 of Blood of the Enemy or Conflict and Strife because I have zero interest in the PvP aspect of this game at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think I've got rank 2 of Conflict and Strife, and I should go for rank 3. I'm just not going to do it.
I mean, next week is Honor Week, so I might try the BOTE grind, but
Let's just, you know what? Let's get wasted and do a stream. Eh?
yeah, I'll live stream the Blood of the Enemy grind.
Yeah. Every time I don't know, we'll have drinking rules. It'll be tequila and it'll be great.
I will set up a conflicting stream of just watching paint dry, and we'll see how the numbers break down in terms of viewership.
I
You be
will
drunk?
actively switch and go from the PvP farming to the paint drying.
I
if it gets
think
me
I think the paint drying stream would be more popular overall, but all the good clips would obviously be from the PvP drunk stream.
Yes.
Yeah, there'd be better highlights for sure.
You ever had tequila and PvP? I'll be yelling.
You already yell.
Yep. No, I don't.
Just a reminder about Divine Steed and where it does or doesn't get.
You remember getting knocked back on Fetid into the wall hitting Divine Steed?
No idea what you're talking about.
So, while we're sort of on the subject of clever tactics, like, can you tell me about using Divine Shield before the pull?
Well, yeah. So one thing that we can talk about here is I did post a like as usual, or I guess I shouldn't say as usual. I've been lazy sometimes, but we had the ret log giveaway, and we only had 2 entries. The first entry was someone who put their Discord tag as Uranus1337, who turned out not to be a real person, so we're not doing that one.
What?
Mm-hmm. And the second entry to the log giveaway was someone who did not link a log, so. And last stream, I did promise if there was no entries that were suitable for a review, we would go find a random log and see what we could pick out and see what's happening in the World of Warcraft. So give me a moment here. Alright, so I have my WoW Analyzer window up because we pretty much always start off inside WoW Analyzer rather than just Warcraft logs, because it has mostly everything we need in here. This is a random Ashvane log. This is no one in particular that we found out. We just opened up Warcraft logs, jumped a few pages back, and picked a log here. So the one thing that we do kind of still use Warcraft logs for is to double check food and potions, because sometimes it gets weird in the analyzer, so we'll go over there first. A bit of a preview there. We'll go to the buffs here and back to tables. So we got our food buff, got a rune, we got some raid buffs there, that's all good. We got some potions there, that was good. One thing that we also double checked to see if they have a monk and a demon hunter in the raid for some more damage. So we'll just double check the damage done page here and close that off. So we have a demon hunter and monk, so we got the full array of buffs, so they're definitely not losing any damage from that. So all the pre-fight stuff here is good so far. No sort of complaints in there.
I also didn't realize there were 5 ret paladins in this raid.
Yes, there's. This raid also happens to be full of ret paladins. I think this is definitely an anomaly in the World of Warcraft.
I like it. I like it, I like it. Ooh,
apparently, this one ret, though, he might be on his way to being a Death Knight, so we'll have to see.
Also, just for my own sanity, that's like 15 people in the raid are in.
So?
Sorry, 13. I can't count right, but still.
Or what? What? You cut out. Oh, yep. Maybe you should change your push to talk.
I did, and then it destroyed my computer.
Alright, so the usual thing that we go over first is we go over openers. Not because the opener makes or breaks your DPS, but the opener gives us an idea of how much you've looked into your spec and what you should be doing on a certain fight. So we'll jump to the timeline tab here. And we have our opener, so we can see in the timeline we have our pre-potion. And this opener is a bit odd. It goes from a pre-potion to Divine Shield and to Divine Steed. Which is definitely an odd combo. One is Divine Shield, as maybe it was a miscast. They didn't mean to press Divine Shield, but it kind of just happened. And for Ashvane, it's a bit odd that Divine Steed will be cast. If you are going to use Divine Steed to get to a boss faster, you generally do it right before the pull and not during actual combat to not use up that GCD if you need it. But also in Ashvane, it's a fight where you're right next to her. There's not much movement to get in range.
Can I pipe in for a second? I just watched the replay, and I'm assuming they usually bring the boss one way, and this time they brought the boss a different way because he ran south and the boss got brought north, and then he steeded and ran away. So
I never actually did the replay.
Mom spaghetti there.
I forgot about replay because it's kind of a last second deal. I forgot to look at the logs last night because I'm a slacker.
It's not super interesting. He bubbled for no reason that I could see. Maybe we were right earlier in like a coral spawned, and he was like, oh shit, the boss is going the opposite direction I thought it would, and I'm just gonna plow through the corals.
But you can also see where all the rest of the melee started significantly closer to the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll get back into it here. And he opened up, or they, I don't know what they are, but they opened up with their wings, and they're also running Inquisition. So as you can see, we got a nice little fancy highlight here is that you refresh Inquisition during Avenging Wrath. It's better to refresh early before Avenging Wrath, so you can spend Holy Power on damage during it. So we always want to make sure that the Inquisition is up before the wings. He's also running Coral. It took him a little bit to apply the Coral, and Coral is off the cooldown, so usually like once the countdown timer is done, you should press your Coral keybind, or if you click it, click the Coral. They get done early.
Here's the thing, though. I forget to apply Coral all the time. I'm really
Get
bad
the
for
weak
it.
aura.
So, like, I know. I just like you use it, and then you've got the buff, and then you just forget to reapply it when the buff is done.
As nice as Coral is, I really hope the trinkets in the next raid are better than Coral, because I'm tired of using it at this point.
Agreed.
So, and also for his talents, he was earning the... I guess we forgot to go over his character page. We usually do that. We haven't done one in a while. I don't know what to do anymore. Alright, so we got the Triple Xberg. We got Double Light's Decree. And... oh, it's Undulating Tides, but it has the different icon for it for some reason. Might have to fix that. But yeah, so we're running Execution Sentence, Hammer, Wrath, Wake, Inquisition. Pretty standard setup. So Major Essence, he's running Visions Major. So he gets the Visions Minor from it as well. For his other minor, he's using Crucible of Flame and also using Lucid Dreams. So a bit of a weird combination. Maybe it's something they prefer to run and they're having fun. If that's the case, that's fine. But if you do want to optimize for your damage, you can definitely check out the guides and sim yourself for suggestions like that and what you should be looking for. And he's also got at least one piece of benthic. It is the bracers, though. He doesn't have the other benthic pieces, so obviously that's a little bit of a drop off there if you don't have them. But we'll go back to this timeline here. So in general, the opener is very odd here when you do run what we affectionately refer to as the Hellscape build. The opener is definitely a lot different than this. And if you check any of our guides, you'll be able to see what opener we would recommend. Usually, in some cases, it's either a build to 3 or a build to 5 scenario, and you'll get everything prepped up. So when you go into your wings, you'll have your optimal burst rotation with your Execution Sentence and your Wake of Ashes and all that to get the most benefit from it. So there is a little bit of pre-planning with a build like this. It's not just pop your buttons and have a good time. Alright, so we can just do our usual, jump along a little bit further in the timeline, see if anything sticks out as being abnormal. And for the most part, here everything is pretty normal. We got a Shield of Vengeance there. We didn't go over the stats yet, but in this case, this is a fight where popping Shield of Vengeance is pretty easy. Usually the boss is tanked on top of coral patches, and you can just pop it and stand in it and break your coral. Also, when people are absorbing little bubbles or soaking them, that's another good spot to pop that shield, so it's easy damage. Yeah, so everything here is fairly straightforward. There's nothing insane going on here. And I just reminded myself I should probably add another feature here to WoW Analyzer that I'm going to do. We have the Inquisition refresh during wings, but I have not yet added one for Inquisition refresh during Execution Sentence. I should probably do that. Yeah, so again, things are looking pretty normal here. There's nothing really horribly wrong with the rotation. So we know that we see a Light's Judgment here, so we know they're a Light Forge, so they used their ratios, so that's good. Hopefully they used it on a group of briny bubbles for more damage, but we can check that in the log if we want to. we're just gonna speed ahead a little bit here. So here's the next wings. The next wings, it was pretty late. Actually, no, it wasn't pretty late. The first wings, hold on. I have 2 logs in my head right now. Which log is this? Yeah, so on this one, they ended up delaying their second use of wings. They had a wings in between because of visions, of course. They might have been saving it for a burn phase because it is Ash Fane. There's the shield phase and there's the burn phase. So we'll jump back up ahead here. And let me double check. Do we miss a coral? Yeah, so they saved their coral for a while. And generally with coral, you're in a setup like this where you're not using the condensed life force or the guardian, you're gonna just use it inside every wings. Usually when you go into wings, your first ability should be a spender. In this case, they went into wings and they opened up with Hammer of Wrath. Because usually the way it works, if you go into wings, if you're going to use Execution Sentence first, you'll want to pop coral with that. But if your first move is going to be a Templar's Verdict or a Divine Storm, that one's already a guaranteed crit, so you'd actually want to save your coral for the next one if it does happen. So a couple minor things there to think about. We got the coral reapplied there in a reasonable time. He didn't delay it, so that's, again, fairly alright here. And overall, as far as the rotation goes, we're just going to slide through it here a little bit more. We're not going to spend too much in-depth time on the timeline. We've done this quite a few times now. And overall, they're doing pretty good. They're definitely not making a lot of like common mistakes. Like a common mistake that we would see a lot is people would prioritize their judgment over their blade. And so far, all the way here, they've been properly prioritizing their blade over their judgment, so that's good. We still see that Shield of Vengeance is getting used, so they're still probably popping it on Soaks or Coral or whatever it may be, so that's good. More Light Forge there. Now we got another pop-up for Inquisition here, but in this case, it's happening near the end of their wings, so it was probably a very close call whether they wanted to refresh first or pop wings first. And also when you run Vision of Perfection, there will be times where Vision procs and you have to refresh Inquisition because it's running out naturally and there's nothing you can do to avoid casting it beforehand. Yeah, so we're getting a few little downtime windows there. That could be the boss repositioning. It could be like lining up to not smash everyone with your coral line. Again, we're just gonna jump through. So final burn here, it looks like their guild, they chose to use Lust on the last little burn phase here. So he got Lust, got his second potion, he got his Inquisition refresh in there. His coral did get popped a bit early. I'm not too sure why. He's not using an ink pot, he was using the gore crusted. So the early coral is a bit odd there. We're just gonna jump to the end. We got some Word of Glory action going on. Again, as far as rotation goes, overall it's pretty fine. A little bit of spots of downtime that were slightly odd. The biggest oddity was definitely the opener. They might have just been unprepared for the boss being pulled, or they got sidetracked. Things happen.
That's what it looked like. I can't say I've never done that.
Well, I think we've all had our share of flubs for boss pulls happening. Alright, so on the main overview page here, we get some more details. So we see, for Holy Power Waste, not a lot. We didn't see any highlight on the timeline, so all of his use of spenders or generators was good. Overall, the damage on Execution Sentence was pretty high. It could be a little bit higher. We talked about a couple of things there, but you want to make sure before you go into your wings, you have your Inquisition already up. It didn't use quite all of the absorb on Shield of Vengeance. That's something that could definitely be improved in this fight, because again, it's a very easy fight to get full benefit or to fully pop that shield. Got a little bit of damage from Rep Buff there. We can see for Wake of Ashes, he never missed any, they were never whiffed. we just got some minor statistics there. Overall, the log it really isn't that bad. Just that the opener was very odd, and maybe their gear choices are a little bit unconventional.
Yes, all this person maybe just has more downtime than.
Yeah, a little bit more than
But
necessary is the main thing.
It's Ashbane, so.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this was her first killer or not. I did not check. Usually I check things like that, but again, this is kind of like very last minute when I remembered to do it. Also, I don't know if we've, again, as a reminder, in case you haven't seen a Wildlands in a while, it does have a phase filter now. So if you want to filter out into a certain phase, you can do that. So you can like go into like the hardened phase or the exposed phase and see the burn. Like if we wanted to see the stats for the final burn here, we could just choose this, and it would go ahead and adjust to it. So we can see here in the final burn, all the damage was buffed. That's good. You can see judgments consumed. One was missing. I'm not sure if there's like a judgment thrown in the end that got missed, or maybe it got thrown on a bubble, and that bubble died before he used the spender. All sorts of things that can happen in that case. You can see in the last phase, here's where he lost a lot of the absorb of his Shield of Vengeance. So the phase filter, if you haven't played with it, definitely play around with it. It is pretty nice. And when you're done, you can just choose to reset it. And if you don't have a certain phase you want to go to, you do have a little timeline here, so you can adjust that yourself. It's definitely something worth playing around with. It makes some fights a lot better to look at what matters on a more granular view rather than just overall and try to guess what you should have been doing. You can see easier on what actually happened.
The site is another good example of third-party tools that are actually really nice.
Yes. So, and that was our log, our randomly selected log, because again, if you do want your log to be reviewed, definitely double check in the stream channel for when those giveaways go up.
I like how they included Lady Ashvane's Tinder picture there in the background. It really makes it nice.
It's very good. Yeah, all the pictures they actually pull in, these are the official ones from Blizzard, like when those like LFR pictures come out. So that's the picture that Blizzard chose.
Yeah, and did you point out that like you helped do the module for WoW Analyzer yourself, correct?
Yes. If by help you mean I copy and paste things and change the name, that is what I do.
Well,
isn't that what all programming is right
I mean,
Yeah.
that is a huge part. That's the Stack Overflow version of programming, but it's still a lot of effort to make sure it's showing you the right thing. So you've done a lot of good work.
Yeah, I didn't do all of it. There's another person Juku that works on it and does a lot of it, but there's a lot of small things I really wanted to go and add here. And I'm not a programmer at all, so I like when people say they don't program. Sometimes they're trying to just be humble. I literally don't program, so I literally copy and paste and how to figure some things out and get some help in some places.
But I'm saying I do program for a living, and I also do a lot of copy pasting. So I think we can give you an honorary title.
Make him more uncomfortable. Talk more about the great things he does.
I don't know, how's your website holding up, Skeletor?
The website is still fine. As far as that goes, I really should do a new reinstall on my virtual machine there for it, because I am using a module for page mod speed, and Google and all their infinite wisdom, for some reason, like one of their security certificates, like it's having a weird interaction where I'm trying to update my box and it's not updating because the SSL certificate is failing, and it's very annoying.
Well, if you get bored and want to do more websites, I need somebody to actually like do an add-on website for me.
you're asking the wrong person.
I mean, alternatively, it would have to be on me, and well, that hasn't happened in 6 years, so probably not going to start.
It's quite impressive
like
the things
that.
I've managed to cobble together with no knowledge of them. Again,
Hey,
copy and
and
pasting is great.
Yeah,
I was going to
The
say,
best.
like, you're not a programmer per se, but the add-on, I didn't know Lua at all, which is the language that WoW add-ons are written in when I started, and you just figure stuff out over time.
And the greatest skill you can have is just how to Google things. It's where a
it's
lot of
true.
learning that stuff comes.
I don't know. I think it's a matter of like this applies to this and applies to the game in general. It's like people seem to be afraid to explore things on their own and try different things to see what happens. They feel like they have to have an answer from somebody else rather than try something out themselves. I'm pretty adventurous in that regard. I like to poke at things and see how to break them or make them better, no matter what it would be. And I think if people had an attitude more like that, where they were more interested in poking at things and looking at things, they could definitely make their lives a lot easier or learn more things easily, rather than having to rely on somebody. Like my thing is like, I don't want to rely on anyone else but myself when I do things. So that's where that comes from in my aspect of it.
I have a similar mentality, but I just don't want people to know that I'm stupid. So I figure things out by myself so they never know that I was stupid in the first place.
I mean, I think this also carries over to our different like class discords and whatnot, because it's really like there are some discords, and maybe mine is one of them, maybe Earthstrain is one of them, where if you don't already know the meta and the like literally all of the basics that have been sort of laid out in the guides and the FAQ and everything, then like people, that's what people are going to drill into you, is they're just going to be like, read the pins, check the frequently asked questions, check the guide. And it's like occasionally like somebody is actually experimenting with something, and like 95% of the time that experimentation doesn't pay off at all because everything's been tested.
Because, yeah,
Well, like someone's done that experimentation in the past and it hasn't panned out.
Right. But then there's that time when someone's like, hey, because this mechanic isn't working the way people have modeled it or that people are expecting, it turns out that, hey, Zeal is actually magical, that Elemental Spirits is providing more DPS than we expected, or that you were expecting that when you pop Ascendance on your enhancement shaman that you were going to continue generating resources, but oops, we forgot to do that for all of the first tier of Legion. um, it turns out that there are all kinds of surprises.
it's true. And we do, like, a lot of the time, we do just send people to the FAQ. And, like, if somebody is like, can you look at my log? People will be like, we'll just use WoW Analyzer. Like, that does happen a lot. I like to think for the most part, we're pretty open when people are like, I think this thing isn't working right, or like, I think I found something weird.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want people to do like, I read the guides, I checked out
Yeah.
WoW Analyzer. It seems like I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, but maybe my maintenance buffs aren't being kept up enough. Like when they also have kind of an idea about what their problem might be, that they're showing that they've been sort of self-critical, which implies that they're willing to actually do something different, and they don't want you to just tell them that they're doing everything right, and it's just unfortunate, it's just RNG or whatever. um, you can work with those people, you can answer questions, you can dig deeper and get somewhere in those kinds of cases.
Yeah, if you
I'm
ask a
always
question
down.
For
and your question looks like you did some research and you've tried things, you'll get a lot better responses in general. Rather than, hey, my DPS is bad, what should I do? Check the pins, read the FAQ, read a guide, have fun.
I think for when I'm in rec questions, looking at people ask questions or whatever, for me it's just, did they put in any amount of effort into their question at all? And like if someone's put even a modicum of like, hey, I thought it was this way, am I wrong? I am more than happy to go and be like, oh no, it's like this, or I think I'm doing this thing wrong or right. And if they give you like any indication they've put more than 2 seconds of effort or thought into their question before they come in the channel, I am more than happy to engage with those people. But if
Yeah,
someone's
I
just
just
like,
don't like being used as Google,
yeah, or
basically.
like, here's my log, why am I not on the top? And it's like, um, there's so many like resources to help you with that, and there's so many things that just put in a tiny little bit of effort, and we're more than welcome, like more than happy to help with problems and understanding, or if you've tried things already and you just can't see the right thing, like that's happy to help people with that. But
Yeah, but also like if you're just looking to be pointed in the right direction to like learn things, that's also fun.
yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not going to show up and be the person that found the one secret trick that does 20% more DPS than what all the theory crafters have already been saying. Like it's very very unlikely. But
But
if
like,
you're trying to fix stuff up and you're willing to look at where you
mhm.
might be making mistakes, you'll get.
We have had a few people find like SimC bugs or things that weren't working quite the way they were, that have like brought something to our attention. Then we go look at it and get it fixed. So like, I mean, sometimes people will find things that other people didn't. Like all the time, it happens. That's the advantage of it being open source and anyone can take a look at it.
Anybody can take a look at that easily readable C++ code.
Well, I mean, like you can even look at the output of the sim. You can go bug one of the like, I don't know how many people still work on SimC, but like, hey, somebody managed the rep module, and you can just go bug and be like, hey, how does this work? Or like, is this this is the this is what it looks like, this is what I'm expecting. Like, there's just so many places in it that you can kind of debug it, sort of.
I'm
Oh,
always happy to teach people about that stuff.
yeah, absolutely. Simulation craft is truly like a community tool, and so it may be hard to kind of like really offer constructive criticism in terms of the code itself. But when you do find that something is not working properly and you submit a ticket and you can provide some information about it, like it does get fixed up. It does get improved, and then uh, everybody's sims are better off for it.
Yeah, community is great usually.
I mean, I've submitted some tickets and then immediately after submitting a ticket found that I was doing something really stupid myself and that it was just
That's
my
the
own.
key, though. That's the key to finding out if you did something wrong, is going to somebody else and being like, I'm pretty sure this thing is messed up, but help, and then you figure it out.
Right.
Well, like, isn't that one of the rules of the internet? The best way to get a good answer is to post the wrong one and have people correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, fortunately our community has, there's no lack of people willing to point out when you're wrong about something.
Mhm. And on that note,
I feel like there are some can of worms that were just knocked over right now, but I think we've definitely had a pretty good stream here. We had a lot of varied topics here. We definitely talked a lot about Hekili and what he does, and we've talked about the 8.3 and how 8.3 is bad because it's not Mr. Pandaria. We talked about how we're hopeful for Shadowlands.
Yeah, I appreciate being able to come in and talk a little bit and banter a bit with you all about what's coming up. Um, I hope that when we make comments about 8.3 and having concerns about corruption, and that people understand that that's really wanting the best for the game. We're saying what we would enjoy or what we think would be good, and we could be wrong about it or whatever. But ultimately, we're just people that really want to have fun with this game and don't want to have a whole bunch of stuff in the game that we don't enjoy or to have to do things that we don't enjoy in order to get to the parts that we do enjoy.
I forgot. There's a question I wanted to ask you. I forgot until just now. What is your favorite or most annoying way that people have either typed or said your name?
Um, oh, honestly, I'm not super bothered. Hekili is a Hawaiian word. It means thunder, and it made sense when it was Soul Lane Enhancement Shaman add-on. And that's where that comes from. I don't expect people to have great pronunciation of the Hawaiian language when they try to reach out to me online. So nothing too serious. I think when I first joined a raid guild for like Siege of Orgrimmar, I think I got Hekili a lot, which is kind of cool actually, but that was sort of the most wrong as well.
I know one of
I
my
kind of
friends.
like it though.
One of my friends, he never reads your name right. Like all the letters are in the wrong place. He's not saying like "Hi Kiki" usually. I'm like, what, dude?
Like Kiki.
I like it.
So when people get it right, it's easy to find. Like I can Google for it and see if like people are having problems or people are bad mouthing me or whatever it is. There is the added complication that while Hekili means thunder, in some contexts it means sweet potato. So you can use whatever definition you prefer.
I think your name's about to get updated in this Discord, unfortunately.
Oh, great.
It's gonna be the thunder potato.
All right, so again, thank you for joining us here today. Definitely appreciate having you on, and also definitely since we are on Sundays now, we'll usually have more people on the stream rather than just me or Rin and me. So now that we're on Tuesdays, we're not stuck with whoever doesn't actually work during the work week, like Shoal, we haven't had on in a while.
Yep,
Yay.
that's what a 9 to 5 job is.
Yeah, now that I've finally achieved
Still work.
9 to 5 myself, all right, but thank you all for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. And I hope you all have a good day. Our next stream will be in 3 weeks.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Cheers, y'all.
Bye.